I'm not sure if anyone's going to believe me when I tell this. Hell, half the time I don't even believe it myself. But it happened. It happened. And every day since, I've been trying to make sense of it. My name's Ian. I've been into survivalism for years now. Camping, hiking, prepping, all of it. So when I heard about a cave system deep out near the divide, untouched by tourists, barely even mapped, it felt like a challenge carved just for me. 5 days alone underground, no contact, no outside help. I figured I could handle it. Before I lost signal, I checked in one last time with Alex over the sat phone. "You sure about this, man?" Alex's voice crackled through. "Piece of cake," I said, laughing. "I'll call you when I'm back topside." He didn't sound convinced, but what could he say? I was stubborn as hell, and nothing scared me. At least, nothing used to. The mouth of the cave yawned open before me, like a jaw frozen mid-scream. The air rolling out was damp and cold, almost sticky against my skin. I checked my gear: flashlight, backup lantern, extra batteries, first aid, rope, food, water. Everything accounted for. I pulled my jacket tighter and stepped into the mouth of the earth. The first few hours were almost peaceful. The tunnels stretched out like the inside of a giant sleeping beast. Stalactites hung low, glittering with mineral sweat. Stalagmites rose up like ancient teeth. Every footstep echoed, bouncing around the narrow walls. I documented everything on my voice recorder, describing the tunnels, the textures, the smell, earthy, metallic. Deeper in, the air grew heavier, like the weight of the ground above was pressing down on me. My breath misted in the light of my headlamp. I kept moving, squeezing through tight spots, sliding down smooth stone slopes, wading through cold underground streams. After a while, I noticed something strange. My flashlight beam, strong and steady until now, started acting weird. It didn't just dim. It stretched, like pulling chewing gum, getting thinner and thinner the further it went. It wasn't normal darkness either. It was like my light was being sucked into nothing. I stopped walking and swept the beam around. The rocks immediately around me lit up like they should. But beyond a certain point, it was like the world just stopped accepting light. "Weird surface," I muttered. "Maybe some kind of mineral absorption?" I forced a laugh, trying to shrug it off. Caves played tricks on the senses all the time. I'd read about people getting turned around by echoes, seeing reflections in puddles and thinking they were tunnels. That's all it was. Tricks. Still, I switched flashlights, pulling out my backup, a heavier military-grade one. Same result. Past about 20 feet, the light just disappeared. No bounce, no scatter, no glow. A small shiver ran through me, but I kept moving. The walls felt different under my hands. Not rough, but soft, like the rock was breathing. I jerked my hand back and shone the flashlight straight at the wall. Normal rock. Gray, cracked, dry. "Get a grip, Ian," I said aloud, my voice too loud in the tight tunnel. The path narrowed even more, forcing me to crouch. I crawled for what felt like forever, my knees scraping stone. The tunnel opened slightly, and I stood, rolling my stiff shoulders. I was about to take a sip from my canteen when the ground shuddered beneath me. It wasn't an earthquake. It was like the rock itself exhaled, a heavy, warm gust that smelled of iron and rot. Before I could react, the floor gave way. My feet scrambled for purchase, but there was nothing. I fell, the walls rushing past me, my flashlight tumbling out of my hand. A sharp pain lanced through my side as I struck an outcropping, then tumbled further into open space. When I finally hit the bottom, the impact drove the air from my lungs. I lay there, stunned, staring upward. My headlamp flickered but stayed on, casting sickly light on rough, uneven walls. I pushed myself to my feet, testing my limbs. No breaks, no major injuries, just bruised all to hell. I was in a massive chamber, the walls stretched up and out into the darkness, but even with my strongest light, I could barely see more than a few feet. Beyond that, nothing. Not darkness, absence. I wasn't blind. I could see the rocks, the ground, the dust. But beyond a certain invisible line, my vision just stopped applying. I swallowed hard. I wasn't alone down here. I couldn't see it, but my skin crawled with the certainty. Something was near, something my eyes refused to acknowledge, and it was watching me. I stood frozen, every muscle in my body tense. My mind screamed at me to run, but where? The chamber stretched out into that void, a place where light died and reality thinned. I could feel the thing's gaze, heavy and damp, like wet cloth draped over my skin. But when I swung my headlamp toward it, there was nothing. Not nothing like an empty space. Nothing like... My eyes refused to process it, skimming over the shape like it wasn't worth noticing. Like my brain slammed a door shut before I could really see. I staggered backward, my boots scraping against loose stones. My heart hammered against my ribs, wild and panicked. "Get a grip," I whispered, but my voice cracked halfway through. I fumbled for my dropped flashlight, finding it by luck rather than sight. When I clicked it on, the beam jittered weakly. Batteries dying already? No, it was fine. I checked them before the trip. It was this place. I forced myself to move. I picked a direction, any direction, and walked. Every few steps I glanced behind me, sure I would catch something just at the edge of my vision. The ground sloped slightly upward, and I clung to that tiny shard of hope. Higher ground meant closer to the surface, right? Maybe I could find another exit, a chimney, or a collapsed tunnel I could squeeze through. My hands slid along the walls, guiding me. They were damp now, slick with something that smelled faintly sweet, like spoiled fruit. I gagged but kept moving. Minutes bled into hours. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. Sometimes I'd shine my light on the wall and realize it wasn't rock at all, but something pulsing gently, like a slow heartbeat under stretched skin. I stopped touching the walls after that. The path widened again into another cavern, this one smaller than the last, but no less unsettling. Strange shapes jutted from the floor and ceiling, not quite stalagmites or stalactites, more like sculptures, organic, twisted, writhing things frozen in stone. I didn't want to get closer, but curiosity tugged at me. Survival rule number 1: know your environment. I stepped toward one of the statues, careful to keep my flashlight steady. It looked like a person, or at least the suggestion of one. Arms too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. The surface was smooth and almost translucent, like wax. A sick thought wormed its way into my brain. What if it was a person, preserved, mutated, consumed? I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. I turned away and nearly tripped over something else. A bag, a hiking bag. Frantically, I snatched it up, checking the ID stitched into the fabric. The name was faded, but I could still make it out. Colton Reese. My stomach dropped. Colton Reese had gone missing 6 months ago. An experienced spelunker. Search teams had found no trace. Until now. I dropped the bag like it burned me. My brain buzzed with panic. If Colton hadn't made it out, what the hell chance did I have? A noise broke through my rising terror, a soft, wet, shuffling sound. I swung my flashlight wildly, scanning the cavern. Nothing. The noise came again, closer. Something was moving through the places my eyes couldn't touch. I backed toward the nearest tunnel mouth, my instincts screaming. I didn't think, didn't plan. I just ran. The tunnel twisted wildly, the walls seeming to shift when I wasn't looking. My footsteps echoed weirdly, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. I thought I heard whispering, but it could have been the blood pounding in my ears. I don't know how long I ran. Time lost all meaning. My legs ached, my throat burned, but I kept moving. Slowing down meant thinking. Thinking meant fear. Fear meant stopping, and stopping would get me killed. Eventually, the tunnel leveled out. I stumbled into another chamber, this one littered with broken gear. Helmets, ropes, shattered flashlights. No bodies, just remnants. The walls here were different too. They weren't stone anymore. They breathed. Slow, heaving movements, like the entire cave was alive, sleeping lightly, waiting for me to slip. My flashlight flickered again. I slapped it desperately, and it flared back to life, but only for a moment, just long enough for me to see the figures gathering in the spaces my mind couldn't comprehend. And then, the light died. Pitch black swallowed me the instant my flashlight gave out. I dropped to the ground, pressing my back against the breathing wall, my chest heaving in short, shallow gasps. I couldn't see. No, that wasn't it. I could see my own hands when I held them inches from my face. The faint outlines, the trembling fingers. But beyond that? Beyond the tiny bubble of my body's own presence? It was like the universe didn't exist. The figures I'd glimpsed, or sensed, were still there. I could feel them without looking. They didn't step or slither like anything natural. They moved in wrong ways, folding through the gaps between my thoughts. I squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't help. The feeling of them pressing in grew stronger. I needed light. Hands fumbling, I tore open my pack. Backup batteries, emergency lantern, chemical glow sticks. Something had to work. My fingers closed around a small flare. Thank God. I struck it against the stone floor, and it sputtered to life, casting the chamber in bloody, stuttering red. The figures shrank back instantly, recoiling from the flare's harsh light. For the first time, I saw them, or at least, what little my brain allowed me to process. Tall, emaciated, faces without features, skin the color of old bone. Their bodies seemed to shimmer, like heat ripples on asphalt, but they weren't really moving. Not yet. A dozen of them, maybe more, ringed the chamber, just beyond the flare's reach. Watching. Waiting. I forced myself to my feet, the flare clenched in my shaking hand. Its light wobbled with every step I took. I had to find another tunnel, another way out. Staying here was suicide. I moved carefully, scanning the chamber walls for an exit. The breathing walls shuddered with every step I took, and the figures pulsed in and out of existence at the edges of my sight. Finally, there, a crack in the wall, just wide enough to squeeze through. I ran. The flare's light flared brighter with my motion, casting wild shadows that seemed to ripple and bend around me. I didn't dare look back. Every survival instinct screamed that looking would only make them more real. The passage beyond was tighter, more twisted. The walls here felt different again, less alive, but coated in something slick and warm. I shoved myself through, scraping my shoulders raw on the jagged edges. Behind me, the figures didn't follow, not yet. But their presence pressed at my mind like invisible fingers trying to dig inside. The passage twisted and dropped, and I half fell down a slope of crumbling rock. The flare slipped from my grasp, rolling to a stop several feet away, its light guttering low. I crawled after it, ignoring the pain lancing through my knees and palms. The flare flickered, threatening to die at any second. I grabbed it just as it sputtered out, leaving me in the smothering non-darkness again. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I ripped open a glow stick, shaking it violently until the dim green light filled the air around me. It barely helped. The glow seemed to cling to me and nothing else, as if the cave refused to be illuminated. Still, it was something. The new tunnel led deeper, always deeper. Sometimes the walls bulged inward, forcing me to crawl on hands and knees. Other times, the ground dropped away so suddenly, I had to scramble to keep from tumbling into unseen pits. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time was a meaningless concept here. I was losing it. Whispers followed me now, slithering into my ears when I wasn't paying attention. Half-formed words, fragments of thoughts that weren't mine. Turn back. It's waiting. No eyes. No eyes, no eyes. I tried to block them out, humming to myself under my breath. A tuneless, broken sound. Anything to drown out the voices. Finally, I stumbled into another open space. This one wasn't natural. The walls were smoother, carved with strange, looping symbols that made my head ache to look at. The ceiling arched high above, supported by pillars that wept a thick, black fluid. At the center of the chamber stood something that might once have been a door. Now, it was a gaping hole, framed by writhing masses of flesh and stone intertwined. The whispers grew louder. Step through. I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed at me to stay away, to turn and run until my lungs burst. But I knew, somehow deep down, that there was no going back. Not anymore. Shaking, I edged closer to the doorway. And something on the other side reached out for me. It touched me. Not physically, not like a hand on skin. Worse. It brushed my mind, peeling back thoughts and memories like pages in a book. I reeled back, clutching my head. The glow stick fell from my hand, rolling into a puddle of black liquid near the broken doorway. It hissed and melted, leaving me in that faint, impossible gloom again. The threshold pulsed, breathing in slow, heavy gulps. The flesh stone around it shifted wetly, stretching toward me as if beckoning. Step through, the voices urged. You belong here now. I tried to fight it. I screamed, a raw, desperate sound, and stumbled backward, but there was no resistance. My heel caught on the uneven ground, and I fell hard onto my back. When I looked up, the doorway had changed. It showed a landscape, if you could call it that. A sky the color of bruised meat, rivers of something thick and red winding through endless plains of writhing shapes. Structures rose in the distance, organic towers stitched from bone and sinew. And everywhere things moved. Some massive beyond comprehension, dragging themselves through the muck. Others small, darting and flickering like flies around a carcass. I wasn't supposed to see this. No human mind was. Tears leaked from my eyes. Not just fear, grief. Some part of me knew I'd already lost something essential by glimpsing it. No, I croaked, crawling away. I'm not part of this. But the air grew thick, syrupy. Every movement was a struggle, like swimming against a black tide. I squeezed my eyes shut. I forced my mind away from the doorway, from the things waiting beyond it. Think, Ian, I whispered, gritting my teeth. Think. Survival. My pack. The emergency beacon. It was old, but if it still worked. Fumbling with frozen fingers, I yanked it free and slammed my thumb down on the activation button. The small device vibrated, a faint beep sounding. It was supposed to emit a signal strong enough to cut through underground interference, to guide rescue teams. I prayed it would. Seconds passed. Minutes. Nothing happened. Then, movement. Not from the doorway. From the tunnels. Footsteps. Boots scraping against stone. Relief hit me like a tidal wave. Here! I shouted, waving the beacon wildly. I'm here! A figure emerged from the darkness, silhouetted against the impossible gloom. They wore a caver's suit, heavy boots, helmet dangling from one hand. I almost sobbed with joy. Hey! Hey, over here! I stumbled toward them. They didn't move. As I got closer, something felt wrong. The figure's head lolled at an unnatural angle. Their limbs hung too loosely, like a puppet with tangled strings. My pace slowed. Dread poured into my chest. The figure raised its free hand and waved. A slow, jerky motion, too mechanical, too deliberate. It wasn't right. I stopped cold. The figure took a step closer. Its face emerged into view, lit by the faint ambient light. It was Colton Reese, or what was left of him. His eyes were gone, hollow sockets staring blindly. His mouth stretched into a grotesque smile stitched at the corners, as if someone had tried to force a friendly expression onto a corpse. "Ian," he rasped, voice dry and broken. "Come with me." I shook my head, backing away. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, taking another shuffling step. "You're already halfway there." The air behind me shifted, a low, sucking sound as the doorway pulsed. Colton's arms opened wide, inviting. "Step through." I turned and ran. The tunnels twisted around me, changing faster now. Walls slid past in a blur, opening and closing without warning. Every turn seemed to bring me closer to the threshold again. Reality was coming undone. I saw flashes of memories that weren't mine. Other explorers, other failures, sinking into the flesh stone, becoming part of the walls. I fell once, scraping my palms raw, but forced myself up, driven by a primal terror deeper than anything I'd ever known. Behind me, Colton's broken voice called out, "You can't leave. Not anymore." I kept moving. The passage opened suddenly, revealing a massive shaft plunging down into darkness. A frayed rope hung nearby, swinging gently as if inviting me to climb. No time to think. I grabbed the rope and rappelled down, burning my hands on the rough fibers. The descent felt endless. My arms screamed with effort. Shapes flickered in the shadows above, reaching. Finally, my feet hit solid ground. Another tunnel yawned ahead, narrow and crooked. No choice. I plunged into it, not daring to look back. And the walls around me began to whisper my name. I sprinted through the crooked tunnel, the walls closing in around me, whispering my name with voices that sounded too much like my own. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The rope shaft was already swallowed by darkness behind me, as if it had never been there. There was only forward now. The tunnel twisted and narrowed, forcing me to stoop, then crawl. The rock was slick under my palms, pulsing faintly, like it had a heartbeat. I tried to focus on the roughness, the scrape of stone against my skin. Anything to ground me. After what felt like hours, the passage opened into a small chamber. I collapsed onto my side, gasping. My hands were bleeding, my knees shredded by the stone. It took me a second to realize I wasn't alone. There was another figure slumped in the corner, their body half melded into the wall. Their face was barely human anymore, stretched and pulled taut, eyes wide open in frozen horror. It was Eliza Hahn. She'd been missing for 2 years. I remembered the news articles, the search parties. Her mouth twitched. A whisper leaked out. "Don't look back." I staggered to my feet, bile rising in my throat. Her warning buzzed in my ears. I couldn't save her. I couldn't even save myself. I stumbled onward, deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew colder, sharper. Each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. My flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of the nightmare landscape unfolding around me. Walls rippling with embedded faces, floors slick with dark fluid that pulled at my boots. I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, useless. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. "Focus," I told myself. "Use the basics. Mark your path." I tore a strip of cloth from my shirt and tied it to a protruding rock. Every few meters, I repeated the process, leaving a trail. But when I looked back, the cloth strips were gone. The rocks were different. The tunnel behind me had changed. I was trapped in a shifting maze that didn't obey any rules of reality. Tears blurred my vision. I scrubbed them away with the heel of my hand. Survival wasn't about strength anymore. It was about not giving up, no matter how impossible it seemed. I pressed on. Time lost all meaning. My legs moved mechanically, my mind flickering in and out of focus. At some point, I found another doorway. This one wasn't broken like the last. It stood tall and intact, a perfect arch of slick, dark stone. Symbols pulsed along its surface, shapes that hurt to look at. Through it, I glimpsed a different world. Not the grotesque hellscape from before, but a dense, misty forest under a twilight sky. The trees were massive, ancient, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. It looked almost peaceful, too peaceful. I hesitated. Was this a way out, or another trap? Ian, a voice called softly from beyond the doorway. I knew that voice. My sister Emily. She died in a car accident 5 years ago. Come home, she whispered. You don't have to be alone anymore. I took a step forward, heart hammering. Then I froze. Something moved behind the trees, shapes too tall, too thin. Watching. The mist shifted, revealing faces. Hollow, gaping faces stitched into the trunks of the trees. It wasn't Emily. It never was. I stumbled back, choking on a sob. The doorway shuddered, a low, angry groan echoing from its frame. The forest darkened, the mist thickening into a smothering wall. I turned and ran again, deeper into the tunnels, away from the false hope. The walls trembled. Dust and pebbles rained from the ceiling. A deep rumble shook the ground, nearly knocking me off my feet. The labyrinth was collapsing, or it was changing. Either way, I had to move. I caught a glimpse of a passage narrowing to a pinprick of light in the distance. It might have been a trick. It probably was, but it was the only chance I had. I ran toward it, ignoring the burning in my muscles, the blood pooling in my boots. The light grew brighter, almost blinding. The whispers grew louder, angrier. "Don't leave," they cried. "You belong to us." I clamped my hands over my ears and pushed forward. Just before I reached the light, something slammed into me from the side, knocking me sprawling. I hit the ground hard, the wind driven from my lungs. A figure loomed above me, shadowy and shifting. It leaned close, its breath cold against my skin. "You can't run from what you are," it hissed. And before I could react, it drove its hand, if you could call it that, straight into my chest. I sprinted through the crooked tunnel, the walls closing in around me, whispering my name with voices that sounded too much like my own. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. The rope shaft was already swallowed by darkness behind me, as if it had never been there. There was only forward now. The tunnel twisted and narrowed, forcing me to stoop, then crawl. The rock was slick under my palms, pulsing faintly, like it had a heartbeat. I tried to focus on the roughness, the scrape of stone against my skin. Anything to ground me. After what felt like hours, the passage opened into a small chamber. I collapsed onto my side, gasping. My hands were bleeding, my knees shredded by the stone. It took me a second to realize I wasn't alone. There was another figure slumped in the corner, their body half melded into the wall. Their face was barely human anymore, stretched and pulled taut, eyes wide open in frozen horror. It was Eliza Hahn. She'd been missing for 2 years. I remembered the news articles, the search parties. Her mouth twitched. A whisper leaked out. "Don't look back." I staggered to my feet, bile rising in my throat. Her warning buzzed in my ears. I couldn't save her. I couldn't even save myself. I stumbled onward, deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew colder, sharper. Each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. My flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of the nightmare landscape unfolding around me. Walls rippling with embedded faces, floors slick with dark fluid that pulled at my boots. I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, useless. Panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. Focus, I told myself. Use the basics. Mark your path. I tore a strip of cloth from my shirt and tied it to a protruding rock. Every few meters, I repeated the process, leaving a trail. But when I looked back, the cloth strips were gone. The rocks were different. The tunnel behind me had changed. I was trapped in a shifting maze that didn't obey any rules of reality. Tears blurred my vision. I scrubbed them away with the heel of my hand. Survival wasn't about strength anymore. It was about not giving up, no matter how impossible it seemed. I pressed on. Time lost all meaning. My legs moved mechanically, my mind flickering in and out of focus. At some point, I found another doorway. This one wasn't broken like the last. It stood tall and intact, a perfect arch of slick, dark stone. Symbols pulsed along its surface, shapes that hurt to look at. Through it, I glimpsed a different world. Not the grotesque hellscape from before, but a dense, misty forest under a twilight sky. The trees were massive, ancient, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. It looked almost peaceful, too peaceful. I hesitated. Was this a way out, or another trap? Ian, a voice called softly from beyond the doorway. I knew that voice. My sister Emily. She died in a car accident 5 years ago. Come home, she whispered. You don't have to be alone anymore. I took a step forward, heart hammering. Then I froze. Something moved behind the trees, shapes too tall, too thin. Watching. The mist shifted, revealing faces. Hollow, gaping faces stitched into the trunks of the trees. It wasn't Emily. It never was. I stumbled back, choking on a sob. The doorway shuddered, a low, angry groan echoing from its frame. The forest darkened, the mist thickening into a smothering wall. I turned and ran again, deeper into the tunnels, away from the false hope. The walls trembled. Dust and pebbles rained from the ceiling. A deep rumble shook the ground, nearly knocking me off my feet. The labyrinth was collapsing, or it was changing. Either way, I had to move. I caught a glimpse of a passage narrowing to a pinprick of light in the distance. It might have been a trick. It probably was, but it was the only chance I had. I ran toward it, ignoring the burning in my muscles, the blood pooling in my boots. The light grew brighter, almost blinding. The whispers grew louder, angrier. "Don't leave," they cried. "You belong to us." I clamped my hands over my ears and pushed forward. Just before I reached the light, something slammed into me from the side, knocking me sprawling. I hit the ground hard, the wind driven from my lungs. A figure loomed above me, shadowy and shifting. It leaned close, its breath cold against my skin. "You can't run from what you are," it hissed. And before I could react, it drove its hand, if you could call it that, straight into my chest. I stood there, frozen, with the shifting thing towering over me. Its presence burned into my mind, branding every nerve with terror. "One must stay," it repeated. The voices it used twisted together into a sickening harmony. My father's voice, my mother's laughter, old friends I hadn't thought about in years. I shook my head slowly, whispering, "No. I have to get out." The creature seemed almost to sigh, a sound like a collapsing building. Another figure emerged from the darkness behind me, and my stomach dropped. It was me, or rather a version of me, hollow-eyed, hunched, with skin stretched too tight over its bones. It looked like it had been trapped here forever. It reached out its hand, my hand. "Stay," it said, voice cracked and dry. "Stay, and you can be free." I backed away, but the real exit, that sliver of cold, pale light, was still blocked by the towering entity. My choices shrank to nothing. Give in, stay, or find some way through the impossible. My heart hammered so loudly it drowned out the whispers. The doppelganger grinned, an awful, twisted thing. and took a step closer. Behind it, the cave writhed. The walls peeled apart like rotting flesh, revealing glimpses of things beyond understanding. Vast landscapes made of screaming faces, oceans of black, boiling liquid, skies filled with things that had too many wings, too many eyes. My knees buckled, but I caught myself. "I'm not you," I said, voice shaking. The double tilted its head, a slow, broken movement. "You will be." The larger entity moved then, its body rippling like liquid shadow. Its mass shifted aside, just enough to leave a narrow gap toward the exit. An invitation. But I knew. It wouldn't let me leave unless something was left behind. Sacrifice. I turned back to the false version of myself. "If I leave you here, you'll survive," it said simply. "You'll forget. You'll be whole." I stared at it. At myself. This broken thing that wore my face. Leaving it felt wrong. Like I would be abandoning a part of myself in this pit. But staying, that was death. Or worse. My breath hitched. I thought of the surface, the stars, the wind. Things I'd forgotten mattered until they were gone. I stepped forward. The doppelganger smiled wider, thinking I was choosing it. At the last second, I ducked low and ran for the gap. The cavern howled around me. Arms, human, not human, reached out of the walls, clawing at my clothes, my skin. I tore free, stumbling, lungs burning. The entity roared, a sound so loud it shattered the air itself. But I kept going, throwing myself toward the cold light. I burst through. The world tilted. The cave behind me screamed shut like a mouth snapping closed. I sprawled onto rough gravel, gasping. Above me, stars. Real stars. The sky stretched overhead, vast and endless. I laughed, a wild broken sound, and rolled onto my back. I was free, but the air smelled wrong, faintly metallic, like blood. The mountains around me were familiar, but off. Shapes shifted at the corners of my vision, and the stars, they didn't twinkle. They pulsed, slowly, like breathing things. Panic gripped me. I touched my face, my arms. They felt real, but when I looked down at my hands, they blurred, doubled, like two images struggling to exist at once. My vision spasmed. The world stuttered. "You left something behind." The thought wasn't mine. It wormed into my brain, oily and cold. I staggered to my feet. The cave entrance behind me was gone, sealed beneath unbroken rock. The ground throbbed faintly under my boots. In the distance, something vast and slow moved across the mountainside, hidden by mist. I realized then that escape was a lie. You can't unsee certain things. You can't return from places that refuse your senses. I wasn't blind. I just wasn't seeing the world the way it was anymore, and the world wasn't seeing me either. Far down the slope, I spotted lights. A small town. Civilization. Hope stirred in my chest again, battered and weak. I started walking. Every step felt wrong, like I was sinking through the ground instead of crossing it. The town didn't get closer. It stayed the same size, no matter how far I trudged. Ahead of me, the lights flickered and shifted, spelling out words I couldn't understand. Whispers floated up from the valley. Not English, not any language I knew, but I understood anyway. "Stay. Join us. You already have." My vision broke again, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was standing or lying down. The stars pulsed harder, washing the landscape in a dull, rhythmic glow. I staggered forward, mind blank with terror. I would reach the town. I had to. Even if the ground beneath me wasn't ground anymore. Even if my own body was beginning to flicker, to come apart at the edges. Even if the town was just another part of the trap. I had to believe there was something real left. Because if there wasn't, if everything I'd ever known was just another layer of the cave, another mask, then I'd already been swallowed whole. I kept walking, and the world kept breathing.